So tonight I want to talk about being faithful. And let me give you the definition of faithfulness. Faithfulness is firmly adhering to duty of true fidelity or loyalty, true allegiance, constant in performance of duties or services. A faithful person is steadfast, dependable, trustworthy, and consistent. That's a lot just for being faithful. You see, there's more verses in the Bible on God actually being faithful to us than Him asking us to be faithful. God shows His faithfulness in many ways throughout our day. But if you read His Word, He's actually telling us how He's faithful in things that we don't even see. And He doesn't really even ask us to be faithful. What He says is, if you're faithful, this will happen. You see, that's interesting because He's not saying, please be faithful. Just do it. Just do it for me. Just trust me. It'll happen. Just do it. He's not saying that. He's saying, if you're faithful, I will give you this. If you're faithful, this will happen. You see, we have to start being faithful in everything we do. Not just one thing. Not just the little things. You know, the Bible talks about if you're faithful in little, He will give you much, right? You see, I was looking at that verse, and this study came from a long time ago, prior to the Holy Spirit one, and I remember looking at it and saying, well, God, you know, I'm faithful in everything that I do. You know, and He says, you know what? He says, you still could be more faithful. And I'm looking at it and go, are you serious? You know, and I'm not boasting on myself. And please, when I talk about myself today, I'm not boasting on myself. I'm telling you that even though I thought I was faithful in a lot of things, you know, I'm coming to work and I'm doing everything that I can do to help the pastors out and do everything that I can do to further the kingdom and further technologically and further the congregation, doing all that stuff, there's a lot of things I was missing. I was being faithful with my children, you know, coaching and doing all the things with them, but I wasn't being faithful as I could be at home. You see, when you work in a church and when you pastor, your time gets eaten up a lot. You know, there's a lot of things that you do. And you forget about your family sometimes because you know, and the family understands, well, Dad's got to be at church because this person didn't show up, so he's got to do this today. And you know, so we understand that. Dad's got to be there today because something special is going on. But you know what? The Bible never told us that we should sacrifice our family for the church. Sacrifice our family for God? Yes. Sacrifice our family for the church? No. So when I was doing this message, you know, I'm looking at my life and I says, man, I thought I was faithful. I'm faithful in my tithes and offerings. I'm faithful in my time. I donate time all the time. I mean, I am stretched, you know, pretty thin, even though I don't look it. And I will do anything for anybody at any time, most of the time. Even at the sacrifice of my family, and that's where God said, you're not faithful. I'm faithful to my wife, don't get me wrong. I'm not unfaithful to my wife. But what He's talking about is your time. When's the last time you went on a date with your wife? My God, I can't even remember. High school. We used to go on, you know, it used to be a joke that, you know, we'd only go out when it was our anniversaries and birthdays and stuff like that. And this year, we haven't even been able to do that. There's been a lot going on. And that's not your fault. That's not the church's fault. That's my fault. See, that's the area that I wasn't being faithful in. You see, and you let that go on too long, and things are going to happen. You know? Things start blowing up at home, and you wonder why they're blowing up. Hello? You're not being faithful. You're not at home at night. Your kids are upset. Your kids can't sleep at night. They haven't seen you much, you know? So I looked at this and I said, okay, God, what do I do? I want to be faithful to my job. I want to be faithful to the church. I want to be faithful to all the things that I am involved in. And God says, well, who told you to be involved in all that? I go, oops. You see, the Bible says in Luke 16, verse 10 through 12, it says this. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in what is another man's, who will give you what is your own? You see, I read that verse and I looked at it and I said, okay, mammon's talking about money. You know, it's talking about faithfulness to another person. That way he can trust you with more. And, you know, I'm thinking about jobs. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about all these different things. But the one thing I never looked at it is faithful to your own family and faithful to God is your top priority. You see, a lot of us are so faithful to our families and so faithful to God that we even forget to come to church. Talk about an oxymoron. Okay, we're faithful to God, but yet we don't come to church. Think about that. Those of you that don't get it, it might be about you. I'm not sure. But you'll get it later. But you see, it tells us that if we're faithful in the least, we'll be faithful in the much. But here's the reverse of that. If we're faithful in the unjust least, the least of the unjust, then guess what? We're faithful in the most of the unjust. Now, that kind of slapped me in the face. Because that means by me not being faithful at home a little, means I wasn't being faithful at home a lot. So with me missing, dinner one night or 2 nights meant that I was missing it a lot in God's eye. You see, we look at a perspective and we say, oh, but I've only been gone 2 days this week. Put that in God's time. What's 2 days to God? What's he say about reigning with him in heaven? A day is like 1,000. So think about that. God's timing is not little. So when we think we're doing something little, unjustly, we're just sinned a little, okay? Or we just swore a little, cussed. Swore. I don't mean you promised something. I mean you cussed, okay? Just a little. Or, we just didn't read our Bible a little. Or we just didn't pray a little. We prayed a little. We gave ourselves a half-hearted tithe and offering, just a little. You know what, to God, that's a lot. You see, because right here it says, he who is unjust in what is least is also unjust in much. And I never looked at the verse that way. Unjust in the least. So I don't care how unjust you are, whether you're a businessman and tried to get an extra $10 out of somebody. It's only $10, God. Come on. They can afford it. If you're unjust just a little bit, you're unjust a whole lot of bit with God. So you may think, I'm only missing church on Wednesdays, but I'm coming on Sundays. Guess what? You're missing church a whole lot in God's eyes. And you wonder why the pastors get upset when we're not here. Because they see it the way God sees it. You're missing it a whole lot. Not just a little bit. Wow, I missed it this week. I had an argument with my wife. Did you ask for forgiveness? Nah, I figured it'd be all right. You missed it a lot. The Bible says never let the sun go down on your anger. Did you ask your wife if she was angry today? I didn't ask my wife yet. I don't want to know the answer. Some of us may not want to know the answer. But you know what? I can say by the end of every day that I make sure that things are wrapped up with my wife and my children. It may not be perfect, but we make sure it's done godly. And we make sure that we're faithful in everything that we do. I don't care what it is. We're faithful. You see, our kids, they try out sports and they get into a couple weeks and they say, I want to quit. You know, and that's fine. They may not like that sport, but you know what? They start it, they finish it. And you know why? Because it teaches them a life lesson. Because not everything in life you're going to like. Now, next year, you may not make them do it, or they may say, I don't want to do it. And like my son, I thought it was un-American for him not to play baseball, so I kept making him do it. But this past year was such a rough year that I'm never going to make him do it again. I've been coaching baseball for a few years now, and I just can't imagine why he doesn't like baseball, but he just doesn't. But I kept making him do it. I'm like, you're going to like baseball if I have to make you. But he's just not getting it. He just won't like it. So, but when he started a sport, he's going to finish it. And, you know, there might be days where he just doesn't feel like going. He loves football. There might be days he don't feel like going to football. I'm like, these are the days you got to push through. There's days I don't want to go to work. How many's ever been there? We push through it. My wife felt bad today because she sent my son to school sick. Well, you can look at it two ways. One, he has to be faithful in school. Because if you don't make school enough times, guess what? You're staying in that same grade. Okay? Two, is it a bad thing if he's got a little cold to go to school? Again, you look at it two ways. Well, he can get other people sick, and we can keep looking at it that way, or we can teach him a lesson that says, listen, sometimes we can fight through even though we don't feel good. How many times do we not feel good, but we still get up, we go to work, but then we say, oh, I'm not feeling good, so I'm not going to church. I went to work, but I'm not going to church. Where's our faithfulness? You see, I was sick the last week. I've been sick the entire week with a cold. And I know if it stops me, I'm just laying in bed. Because there's been some of those where I'm just like, I don't feel good. I'm just not getting up. You know, honey, give me some soup or something, you know. But I pushed through it. And I thought about it last Sunday, and I'm thinking, you know, I really don't feel good Sunday, and I'm coughing, and you know, in the head, the devil's saying, you're going to cough all the time in church, you'll disturb the service, so you shouldn't go. I'm like, you're so stupid. You actually think that's going to work on me? I pulled those tricks. I taught the devil those tricks. What's he trying to teach me those things for? I wasn't always a perfect child, let me tell you. So I used to pull those tricks on my mom, but you know what? I don't think I ever missed a day of school when I was a kid. And I told you the story about Vicks, NyQuil, and Azorbine Jr. fixed everything. So they would shove all three in me and send me to school. But Mom, I can't walk. Need some Azorbine Jr., that'll fix it. Eat some Vicks, you'll be all right. In fact, the only time I was not in school is when I got kicked out of school. So that was the only times I could have days off. Well, Mom, you can't send me. They won't let me go back. All right, so we'll work you to death at home. Never mind, I'll go back to school. So there's good life lessons in many things, and there's good things to teach your children about faithfulness, and you yourselves have got to set an example about faithfulness. If you expect your children to attend church when you don't regularly, don't become running to me in 10 years saying, my child's out of control. You're the youth pastor, do something about it. 10 years I tried to tell you you're being stupid and you should be in church. But you weren't listening. You weren't faithful yourself, so guess what? They learned that from you. Like father, like son, like mother, like daughter. You know, it's all there. You see, it's so simple, but yet we can be talked out of so many things because the devil knows our weaknesses. My wife's weakness was guilt. And the devil was making her feel guilty about sending Jordan to school. And I get home today after he gets out of school, and the kid looks like there's nothing wrong with him. I go, how do you feel? He goes, better. I go, good. I knew you would. We prayed. You don't have nowhere else to go but better. But see, the devil tried to make my wife feel guilty. Why? That's a weakness. I don't feel guilty about much, so he doesn't attack me in that area. There are some areas he can attack me, and don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I won't be perfect till I get to heaven. I'm close, but I'm not perfect yet. That's my weakness, by the way, pride. Pride comes before the fall. I kill myself daily, by the way. I do what Paul says, and I die daily because, I can be one of those people that are arrogant and prideful, but I'm also humble a lot of times too. And I learned, there's a lot of times I goof around, I joke around and stuff like that, and I learned there's a fine line with that stuff, and I'm still growing. I'm only 38 years old till tomorrow. I'll be 39. Then it's Lori's turn. She'll be 39 2 days later. Women never tell their age, but men can tell the women's age anytime. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm not learning fast enough, apparently, but I'm learning. I'm learning, and yes, there's times where God will let me fall on my face, and there's times where He'll pick me up because He knows that I tried in that area. And that's all we got to do. We just have to try to be faithful. The more times you try to be faithful, the more likely you're going to continually be faithful. How would you like it if your husband or wife only came home every other day? How would you like it if you only ate every other day? Some of you might. Matthew looks like he only eats every other day.
5 times a day.
I'm not talking about Snicker bars. But see, faithfulness is a lifelong journey. And we can't stop at just once in a while. Okay, for the first 3 months of the year, I'm faithful. I'm at church Wednesdays. I'm at practice for music. I'm at church on prayer. I'm at church on Sundays. In fact, I even stay late and lock up. The next 3 months, we can't see you for anything. What kind of faithfulness is that? Faithfulness is not a period of time. You see, time in God's eyes is what? Infinite. So to be faithful in God's eye means you have to be faithful infinitely. Well, we're like, wow. I thought it was a tough commitment before, but now you're telling me I got to do it forever? Well, yeah. We've had the same worship team for a long time. Why? Because people are afraid of commitment. I don't know why. It's not as if we make you work real hard. I mean, I sweat a lot back there, but that's just because I'm big. Sean does the same thing, and he don't sweat at all. So it's not that you got to work real hard. Sure, you got to show up on a Saturday. You got to show up on practices. You got to play a little extra longer sometimes. But really, what are you doing it for? You're doing it for God. Where's the faithfulness come from? It should be coming to God. And it should be going to God, your faithfulness. It shouldn't be, I'm serving Dave Wingard because he's my boss, so that's who I'm being faithful to. Well, no. I'm being faithful to God by being faithful at my job, by being faithful in everything that I do. Matthew 25:21 says, His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. You were faithful, because you were faithful over little things, a few little things that I gave you in charge of. Let's say I gave you, I put you in charge of cleaning that chair. Okay? I'm going to reward you by letting you clean all of them. Who thinks that's a reward? Okay, well, in God's eyes it is. Okay, I started this church. My job was just to work with the youth. All right, and do some office work. Well, apparently I was faithful. So God gave me much more to do. To the point where I'm like, okay, God, I don't want you to be faithful anymore. I'm good. Stop. All right? But He knows what He's doing. I don't know what He's doing, but He knows what He's doing. And I've learned to sort out my time. And I learned that you give God the time first thing in the morning, the rest of the time will go smooth. You don't be faithful with God in the morning with that time, your day's going to go crazy. All right? I've learned that. Doesn't mean I keep doing it that way, but I learned it, that's the way it works. But see, if you're faithful over a few things, he will make you ruler over many things. You know, I don't know why people want to be ruler over many things, but sometimes it takes you to make a difference. And sometimes some people can handle one thing, and that's all they can handle. And then there's other people that can't handle just one thing. They got to do 5, 6 different things. And I've heard this story over and over, how women are multitaskers. I think it's a bunch of garbage. You've heard that from me. They're not multitaskers because nothing ever gets done. I'm just kidding. Everything eventually gets done. No, my wife, she's a very good multitasker. She does many things at one time. But what I don't understand, with multitasking, you usually like to finish, one thing at a time. But with women, they get everything going at the same time, so everything finishes at the same time. But it just doesn't look like anything's really getting done until it's actually done. So now I understand the multitasking that women are talking about. See, men, we multitask. We have 5 things going at one time, but we're going to finish them in order. We're going to finish the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, fourth thing, and eventually we'll get to that 5th thing and it'll get done, right? Like, I should have mowed my lawn like a week ago, but I had some other things to do and I haven't been that way yet. See, the women, they would have started mowing the lawn, started the laundry, they would have started cooking dinner, and they'd have had it all done at sunset. Guys got to have that mapped out. That's just a little freebie for you for men versus women. I just thought I'd get that for you. Because I'm such an expert in the area. That's my sarcasm again. Hope you all got that. Luke 19:17 says this, and he said to him, well done, good servant, because you were faithful in very little, have authority over 10 cities. Wow. Okay, so now he's governor. The guy started out as a sanitation engineer. Because he was faithful, he's the governor. Just think of it that way. Right? How many cities is the governor in charge of? More than 10, by the way. The whole state. So however many cities are in that state, that's how many he's in charge of. So think about it in politician view, although, that's never mind. If you think about it that way, somebody who starts out in, the mailroom that they always say, starts out in the mailroom and all of a sudden he becomes president, is because he was faithful in all those little things going up the ladder. Okay? So once you're faithful in the little things, God's going to put you over many. Here he talks about 10 cities. And he was talking about the talents that he gave out to 3 different people. 2 talents, the 5 talents, and the 1 talent, and they doubled them or they hit them, whatever. You remember the 5 talents went back and doubled them, 2 talents went back and doubled them. 1 talent, he went and hit it because he thought that he was doing God a service and being faithful by holding on to that. You're not being faithful by holding on to your gift. You're not being faithful by holding on to your money. You're not being faithful by holding on to what you think you need to hold on to. You're not being faithful in that. You're faithful when you give it all to God. That's when you're faithful. When you can say, Lord, I've prayed. I've done what you've asked me to do. I've done what I can do in the natural. Now I leave it to your hands, and you're going to take care of it. You see, that's faithfulness. See, faithfulness isn't just going out and saying, I'm going to pray about it. I don't feel led. I love that one. Hey, can you usher this week? You know what? God's telling me I need to be in the service. He's telling me that I need to be in praise and worship. I just asked you to serve. God came to serve. So I believe God's actually talking to you saying, serve, not to be in worship. Is it just me, or is that just make sense to me, or does that make sense to everybody? You see, because it just doesn't make sense when somebody says, I need you to do something today, help out with the children because we don't have enough workers. Nah, I've had such a busy week, I'm going to have to stay in the service and hear what God has to say. You are... I can't even say it, but you are going to be better off if you serve than if you come into the house of God. Yeah, you might learn something in here, but you're not going to learn as much as you would have. And I'm not saying, okay, everyone has to go down and serve, and there are times where you need to be in service. And people know I get on them and say, hey, you haven't been in service for 3 weeks. What's going on? Well, I've been done in the nursery. Okay, that's changing. I'll fix that. I'll do that, But that's that. But when I'm talking about people that just say, well, I've had a rough week. I really just need to sit down and not do nothing today. I think you can handle it. You're just a preacher. You don't really do nothing. You just come to church and sit down in a chair, look at the computer, fiddle with a couple of things, then stand up here and talk. That's not that hard. Anybody want to do it? My wife asked me today. I had to make a decision today. Today's open house at the high school. Was I going to be at open house, or was I going to serve at the church? Now there again, it's the family versus the church. But you see, here's the thing. I'm being faithful to my pastors because they needed to get away. So God's going to be faithful to me by giving me more time with my family. You see, I know how it works. I know how time works. If you don't know how time works in biblical standards, then you need to get the books by Chuck Pierce. Because you need to understand how time really works. You have more than 24 hours in a day. You have more than 7 days a week. You have God's time. You see, if you're faithful in that little, He's going to give you a lot of time to take care of what you need to get taken care of. And things will go smooth. You ever try to do a project and it just, a simple project, you want to fix a light switch in your house and it turns into 3 hours, right? Or it can be 10 minutes. Why? Well, it's that time factor. Are you being faithful? Are you doing this job? Are you trying to fit this job in when you shouldn't be? Maybe you should wait a day and see if that's, maybe the next day would be better. You try to fix some plumbing and then you rip out the rest of the plumbing and it's all messed up. Or maybe there's somebody in the church who actually knows what they're doing and they could have done it for you. Why do you have to do everything? I'm talking to myself right now, really. I really am. I'm telling you my life. I know a lot of trades. I know a lot of different things, but I don't have to do them all. I feel like I do. You try to save money. You try to do here and here. But you know what? God says, listen, it is better for you to spend time with your family than you to waste 3 hours trying to fix that computer. When you can send it to somebody for $55 and it'll be done in a half hour. But God, I don't let anything try to beat me. You see where my weakness is? I don't like to give up. I don't quit. A lot of you guys know that about me. But that greatest strength can be your biggest weakness. And you got to remember what the enemy's going to try to do to you. I learned that when I spent 8 hours working on that stupid computer up there because I had to redo the hard drive and clone it and do all these stupid things to it, and it still didn't work. 8 hours later, God says, take it to the guy. The guy is Walters Plus, by the way. And I talked to him before I even started this project. He says, yeah, it'll cost you $40. I'll have it done in a half hour. I says, well, half hour, heck, I can do it in 15 minutes. If he can do it in a half hour, I can do it faster. My weakness. So I spent 8 hours getting it just about done and turned it back on and ain't nothing working. And then all of a sudden it's got 2 operating systems in it. I have no clue where they came from. And I'm not dumb about computers. I know computers very well, actually. But for some reason, I think God was teaching me a lesson on this one because it was just frustrating. I was here overnight. I'm here in the middle of the night working on this computer. I can't sleep because I'm trying to figure out why this computer ain't working because I can't give it up. It still don't work. The next day I go, okay, Walter, here you go. I stand there for 20 minutes. It's done. I go, you got to be kidding me. He says, I told you to bring it to me to begin with. I told you to bring it to me. You see, I wasn't faithful. I could have spent that 8 hours at home with my wife and my children. I wasn't faithful. God's saying, all right, you're going to be stupid. I'm going to teach you a lesson. And that's exactly what he did. And then the next day, I have a computer problem. I'm like, I got this. I got this. I ain't going to touch it. Here you go. I know what I'm doing. So I learned slowly, as some of us men do. We are a little bit slow learners. But I got to tell you, if you spend your time in the right areas and you're faithful in the right areas, He is going to be so faithful to you that it's going to be unbelievable how much you can do. It's going to be unbelievable how much time you actually have. You'll actually have time to rest. Things will be going smoothly in your house. Your kids won't be bugging you. They'll be joyful. They'll actually want to hug you. You know, your children actually hugging you. That's a good thing, okay? You know, they'll actually be having a good day. You know, everything will just go smooth. Your car won't break down. Your lawn will get mowed. Maybe somebody will come mow mine. Any takers? No, just kidding. But let me tell you, faithfulness comes by practice. Okay? You got to try it out. You can't just do it one time and think, okay, I was faithful, nothing happened, so I quit. That's not faithfulness. Let me say something real quick to you, and I'm gonna wrap this up in 5 minutes. I don't know why we changed our time, because it just makes us go longer. Let me read this to you. Acts 11:23 says, when he came and he seen the grace of God, he was glad, and encouraged them all that with purpose of heart they should continue with the Lord. Do not give up because something didn't work out right away. Be faithful. All right? When you're first learning a trade and it doesn't work for you right off the bat and you just don't seem to be getting it, sometimes it takes a little bit of time. But after you've learned that trade for a year or whatever time period, you all of a sudden got it and you can do it in your sleep. And everybody looks at you and says, how can you do that? Because I was faithful throughout that whole time and I learned it and I studied it. You know, we always ask Sean, how can you play like that? He was faithful. He may have ignored his wife a couple more times than he should have, because he was in a studio learning some part. Because he was learning some part over and over and over. He's faithful in that. Over and over and over. Okay. Things that we should remain faithful in and to. There's 18 of them. I'll say them real quick. Jobs, our word, character, our character, our walk with God. Big one, church attendance. Oh, here's another big one, tithes and offerings. Pastors, prayer, not just here, at home too. Serving, our ministries. Who knows what their ministry is? Anybody? Some of us don't. Our spouse. I added that one just for me. School. I talked about that. Stand up and make changes. All right? I've got involved in things to make changes. Sports. God comes first. Remember that, teenagers. You're never going to be good without God. A lot of people have tried. A lot of people have failed. Government. Who wants to be faithful to the government? Are you serious? You're telling me to be faithful to government? Yeah, I'm telling you to be faithful to government. I don't care if you like or dislike the president, the governor, the senator. I don't care at all. If you're not faithful, God can't move. Can't change hearts. Be faithful. Pray for them people. Man, quit being ignorant and stupid. Just be faithful, and God will take care of it. Trust Him. Family, children, mothers, fathers, etc. His Word, the Bible. Be faithful to His Word. Be faithful to God. Most importantly, be faithful to God. And the last thing is all things. Be faithful in all things. Let me tell you this last verse, and then I'll close. Psalm 31:23 says this, O love the Lord, all you His saints, for the Lord preserves the faithful and fully repays the proud person. What does that say? For the Lord preserves the faithful. You ever see somebody who's 80 years old and they just look like they're 30? They've been faithful. Not faithful by putting on makeup and lotions and creams, but they've been faithful because the Lord preserved them. How can a pastor stand up here and preach Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday? Because he's been faithful and the Lord has preserved him. It's in the Word, people. Psalms 31:23. The Lord will preserve you if you're faithful. What's the opposite of preservation? Deterioration. You want to deteriorate quickly? Don't be faithful. Simple as that, right? Now, I know we've had a good time tonight. We've had a few laughs. But it's truly on my heart that you need to start being faithful in the little things. I don't care if you have to get up an hour earlier, a half hour earlier, 15 minutes earlier, or go to bed 15 minutes later, whatever it takes to be faithful in a certain area, whether it's your husband, your wife, whether it's your job, whether it's your ministry, whether it's with God, whatever it is that you need to be faithful in, or that you need to start being more faithful in, start doing it a little at a time. If you try to do it all at once, you'll be overwhelmed, and you won't stick with it. Okay? You have got to start a little. Why do you think God mentions it so many times? Very little. Be faithful in very little. I was very little when I was born. I am no longer very little. Because I was faithful in eating. It's a simple principle. You want to be big? Be faithful in eating. That's all I got tonight, people. Be faithful in very little. Amen? Let's